Yo, this is Corey. I'm from Modbap Modular, and I'm here with PharcydeTV, my man Brown, and we're gonna get into some Modbap beats and a couple of things. So yeah, let's check some things out. Yeah.
Word. Man, I've been trying to make this happen for a long time. We've been talking about it. I appreciate you coming down. First of all, I think the first question that we should just start off is Modbap. What is Modbap?
Well, so Modbap is a term that I made up just kind of, I started getting into modular synthesis. I've always been a beat maker, and I wanted to kind of merge those two worlds. It wasn't like it was an intentional sort of thing, but I knew like this was intriguing to me, right? So modular synthesis was just something that kind of, every time I saw it, I would just be like, yo, I'm into that, let me check it out. And when I got into it, I got in my studio and started making beats and kind of combining the things. And being tongue-in-cheek about it, I just said Modbap, this is Modbap. And the name just kind of stuck, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, Modbap is basically kind of the fusion of boom bap beats or hip hop of any sort, just beat making with modular synthesis and synthesis, because there's just a certain way of thinking and aesthetic that goes along with modular synthesis. And when you combine the two, it can be some really creative and, next level individual stuff. So that's a name I made up to kind of denote this fusion of styles that I was playing with.
So who would you say, I mean, was there somebody that you seen, or was there like, or you just picked it up yourself? Was there somebody that introduced you into the whole modular situation? Like, was there a particular person, or?
Well, it really was squad, really. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like I found myself with a couple of like-minded folks. And, when I found myself with these couple of guys, let's see, my guy, Ken Flux Pierce, my other guy, Bryce, is Upright. He used to post on Instagram as Upright Music. And then my guy, Shiro, Voltage Controller. You know what I mean? I'm sure Voltage Controller was doing things long before most of us.
Yeah.
But these are guys that are like fam to me. You know what I mean? So Yeah, I guess we've kind of stumbled upon these things, and I got certain influences from them. And then, as we started kind of moving and branching out and stuff, there's like a circle of influence amongst fam.
So just talking before, so when you was telling me you went to technical schools, now it makes complete sense of what you were saying. So getting into it, did you always see that you were going to make your own pieces, or was it just something that just came along?
Well, it kind of came along because, like I said, in Chicago, where I'm from, and we had a rap group, and we were heavy participants in Chicago's hip hop scene. And it got to a point where I just kind of knew, we were young dudes, young 20s, early 20s, or something like that. And I just kind of felt like, you know what, bro? I think I'm gonna go to school. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm gonna stop doing what we doing, but I also felt like I needed another thing. You know what I mean? And so I've always been the kind of like I was telling my wife one day, I was a little young dude, and I asked my granddad, "Hey, can I use your basement so I could build a model of the block?" Like that's always been how my head thinks. I want to tinker and build something. I've always been like that. So at some point, I decided to go to technical school, and so I just went and I got a degree in electronics, and that's when I sort of discovered Moog, because I wanted to build a theremin. So I had a homie who's actually my daughter's my daughter's godfather. And we were studying together and doing class projects and stuff together. And I remember saying like, yo, for our senior project, for us to get our degrees, we should build a theremin. And the truth be told, we never got a chance to build that theremin or design the things or go through all that, because somebody said, yo, there's an easier way. We could give you credit if you come and volunteer at this place building computers or something, right? So we never built it, but that was kind of a moment through us learning electronics where I learned about synths in that way, about people like Bob Moog and that sort of thing. So although I never said I'm gonna one day build something and manufacture my own stuff at that point, it always was kind of like a through line. You know what I mean? Even later, I had a homie and we used to sketch up different drum machines and ideas and stuff. But we were in Chicago and just weren't in an environment that knew anything about how we could even go about doing something like that. Nonetheless, all of these years, that whole time, I was still performing, whether it was, doing whatever it was within the hip hop community. And, but that technical side continued to grow and grow and grow. And eventually, when I merged them, this is kind of the grand result of it all.
So all in all, let's say like the process from your initial concept to actually getting the actual product, like how long would you say that it took you to make something like that happen?
Once I started getting into modular synthesis kind of heavy, I always felt like, it'd be nice if there was something like this or something like that. So I started keeping little sketches, and we would toss ideas around, say we, because I have a group of friends that I would sometimes be like, yo, why aren't they making something like XYZ? And we all had little things like that. But then, so that was a point when I really started keeping notes on some of the things that I like. Then I became a beta tester for some other companies, realizing like, yo, some of the bugs I'm finding, or even some of the things that I'm like suggesting that could make things better, end up in the product that gets to market. That kind of switched the light on. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, the difference is resources, right? Yeah. So like I really start getting heavy into my sort of drawings and ideas and specs and stuff that I would keep. So I would say if I started keeping these ideas, probably as early as 2016 and 17. But when it really went serious is like in 2018, I decided one day I'm gonna find a way to do this. So I started really trying to dig in and meet as many people as I could, and I was doing a podcast. So just in the music equipment industry, kind of meeting all these people, interviewing different people, and having people come through, and I realized I was learning stuff as I was blogging and blogging and stuff, I was learning all these things. So I would say from 2018 or so, but then 2019 happened, and that's when I knew I got to make this happen right now. So this is the Performer with the 4 arcade buttons. And, the idea was when I was going out and performing with my modular stuff, I was taking a few different things, and I wanted things. I'm like, I would like this to do this, that, and the other. So anyway, the Performer was one of the things that I felt like didn't look like anything out there. So at that point, it's like, yo, I mean, if you're gonna do it, let's really do it.
Coming from me when I saw that performance, because I host a thing called organic beats, and so it's a lot of producers, and they just kind of make their beats, and I would say 80% are 404 SP 404 people. Yeah. So when I saw the I was like, hey, this is the 404. I was like, he restructured it and made it so it fits right into your machine and it's incorporated. So I think that idea was just genius, and I think that goes into further to what Modbap is, because it's taking like you're transcribing different machines into something of like a different format to say, look, this is it does the same thing, we just have this in a Eurorack format. So I think that's cool. So I see you're an MPC person. Have you always been MPC? Have you been was it machine first or SP 1200 first, or was it always MPC?
It's always been MPC for me. I'm an MPC guy. Man, I mean, back in the 90s, I was always in proximity to an MPC. There's been a time or two when I've seen other machines, but rarely was it anything other than an MPC. My best friend taught me how to use an MPC. We would go to the studio, they had an MPC. I went to a DJ's house once, he had an SP12, and I was like, You know what I mean?
So it's because everybody, like, I mean, California, I mean, I would always say we were EPS or MPC. That most of the people that I knew. Yeah. And then when I went back east, everybody was SP 1200 and 950. That was just that was the combination. So that setup didn't make it to you in Chicago. You were just MPC.
I've known people that have had that setup, but later though it seems like somehow people found out about that setup, and then people started kind of getting on that kind of thing. Because I'll tell you, MPCs were so prevalent where I was from with people that were into making music, that there have been other devices that have come around. And it wouldn't last long, like they wouldn't be around long. Like I had a homie who had an SP12, and he felt like it was too difficult to use, or like it felt archaic to him in that moment, and so he went and got an MPC 2000, and that's what we rocked on. You know what I mean? It was just kind of MPCs have always just been the more prevalent machine, but I don't think that there wasn't the other setups. It's just everybody that I knew and that I was around was on MPCs. Yeah. But when I went to all the studios, it was always MPCs. I think I may have run across an ASR 10.
And I was about to say that because for me, like me on a production level, like and basically that's what LabLifePro is all about, because I would like to meet people, because I was always curious to what equipment people use to make certain songs. And so I would be like, well, on this song, like it sounds like this, but I don't know. So I just know, like with the ASR 10, like I've ran through every drum machine that there possibly could be. So when I got the ASR 10, I just remember one of the reasons for me getting the ASR 10, because they were like, man, Mobb Deep recorded their vocals through the ASR 10 to use the effects. And I was like, what? Yeah. What? I need an ASR 10 right now. Because I was like, that's how that reverb, that when you hear P's voice, like you hear that. I was like, that sounds like nothing. So got an ASR 10, but I just could not handle the sequencing. I was like, this sounds so crazy. And then like people were like, oh, RZA used an ASR 10. I was like, now that makes sense, because I can tell how the chop structure sounds to why its end result was what it sound like that. Because I was like, it doesn't sound the quantization is not like right on like that. It's a little loosey goosey. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I was like, I understand that. So Just going in, like, yeah, for me, like I said, I always was interested in machines, and I felt that the platform was also built for people that I wanted people to get recognition, because if you're going out using these people's equipment, I think that the company should know who's using the equipment, who's going out there, and support these people that's using your product, and also listen to them, because they could make the product better because they're using it every day, and just listen. So that goes back into how we were saying the whole YouTube thing right now, and how that's in a fray, and people are just not, I'm saying right now, I this platform, I had stopped it for a while, but this platform is not for anybody talking about anything. This platform is for learning. I just want people to learn and people to grow and extend from that. So thank you again for coming, because it's been a long time that I've been seeing. So can you just talk about? I know you have like right now you have what, 5? I think you have
6
like
modules,
5,
and
like
always
6.
working on the next.
Yeah. So just I would just like for you to just explain your mod, what's going on with your modules, and like what one's for, and how you came up with the idea and what it is.
Okay, cool. I'll try to go in chronological order and see what I got. So the first one is Performer. And I have 2 performers here, and the reason I have it like that is because in my rack, it's basically an effects module. So it's a multi-effects module, and like you mentioned, like the SP404, I remember posting the 404 and saying, this needs to be a Eurorack module. And then I deleted that. And that began me making it into to do my own interpretation of what this could be in Eurorack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the NAM performance, you had and that's where me and you, that's why I would contact you, because I had just got the Force, and I was just like, Corey, I see you. Like, how do you doing this? How do you structure this? Yeah. But then I saw you had the 404 on the side using it for effects, and so natural progression made you build the performance. So.
Exactly, because and some people would be like, yo, if you only using the 444 effects, it's blasphemy, right? I used to be like, that's what I use it for, yo, you know what I mean? But then too, I wanted to lighten the load of what I would take out with me, because I had a much bigger Eurorack case at that time, and I was taking the Force or an MPC and the SP404. But then the idea of starting to develop my own modules, this idea of like, yo, just 4 effects with some extra sort of coloration type stuff on it. So I started developing this thing with this with Performer, and Performer is spelled PER with the number 4 MER, to these 4 effects, the core effects, delay, reverb, glitch or beat repeat, and tape stop. And those things, there's reverbs and delays out there. But at the time when I dropped this, I don't think there was many, if any, multi-effects processors in Eurorack, right? And so that's what I'm always scoping at, like, what we might want. There may be things you can do, grab multiple things and kind of do some stuff, but I'm always trying to sort of distill the complexities into a module that says, like, yo, you can use this and get all of that stuff that you might want to get out of it. So the idea of having those performance effects right here, and then what's the difference is that, it's those core effects. Every effect has 4 knobs that you can manipulate, 4 parameters per effect. And then I have a coloration and a full-fledged compressor there. And then it's CV, because it's Eurorack, you have CV. So you can actually automate the effects using CV and voltage through the MPC, because the MPC now has CV on the output on it, right? And so that's the first one. I dropped that. I said I started like kind of really seriously thinking about this or saying I'm going to do this in 2019. Yeah. So Performer came out in October of 2020. So we started developing in 2019, and then the pandemic hit, and it was mad delays, but I was determined, like, yo, this is going to drop. And
that's another thing I would have to say, because you're doing this during the whole pandemic time, and then, like, if anybody knows, as far as like manufacturing something during pandemic was like the worst time to do it, because shipments wasn't coming in. A lot of people would, like, there wasn't certain parts, you had to wait on certain like even I think like chips to cars, like they were like I think like the Toshiba plant, they said like
there was one burned down and another plant somewhere else had a huge flood. I mean, it was a bunch of reasons. And then COVID with the workforce, you know what I mean? So
there was a specific chip. There was like this company makes this, Toshiba makes the chip, and like everything is just on the hold right now because these companies closed down. So performance. So what was I saw you talk about it like 2018, like I got something coming, and then it started coming. Yeah. So after that, what was your next one?
The next one was Osiris here. So Osiris is an oscillator. It's a wavetable oscillator, and I gotta say, I've had other wavetable oscillators, and I never really had great luck with them or didn't enjoy them as much as I thought I would. So I think what I was doing with Osiris and is trying to figure out, when I build my oscillator, what can I do to make it give me a wide swath of sound, but still be something that I might play on a regular synth, or just has the most versatility. So I created Osiris. I partnered with somebody, a synth architect, sort of developer, and with my spec and some of his synth architecture know-how, we developed this Osiris, right? So it has 32. It has 4 banks of 32 by 32 wavetables in it, and without getting super technical about it, it's like having 32 sounds, or it really is more than that. So 32 by 32, you're basically, that's, multiplied that by 4. So you get something like 4,096 different waveforms in just this one thing, whereas some other wavetables out there may have 10, 12, 24, 64, whatever it might be. So this is like got a lot of different sound capability in it, but then on top of that, I could do wave folding, I could do FMing, like all these different things to kind of add texture to the thing. And then I got the X and Y knobs here so you can scan. So think of this grid. So if you looked at the MPC, you got, this is the wavetables, and each one of those rows has a waveform in it. Then you scroll down, that's how many wavetables are in the bank, right? So you can use this X and Y, and you're literally scanning through X and Y up and down, and you can just kind of scroll through the different waveforms, which kind of creates textures and different things as you do that. So that's Osiris. That came 1 year later. In between there, I started making cables and accessories and stuff like that.
With Osiris, are you able to? Are people able to put their own wavetables in Osiris? So, like, is there like a special program that you recommend for people for making wavetables to put into Osiris?
Yeah. So as we were developing this, I realized that the spec that we wanted, there was not something that was readily available, so people could create their own wavetables. So there was an open source program out there, and we made a fork of it, which basically means it's open source, so you can develop based on that. You could use that code and develop further on that. So I basically used the code for this particular, it's called Wave Edit. And so Wave Edit is open source, and I built Osiris Edit to be able to develop wavetables for this, and it gets the same spec. You can export and put it all on it. At the moment it's just for Mac, but at some point I'm a small team, so
and then I wanted to mention that because how you were saying as far as the rows, that even expands the sounds even that much further once you start making your own wavetables, that you can have a whole different bank. Okay, so next one came after that, after Osiris was
so after Osiris, I think it was Transit, and that's here. What that is that's an all analog module. All my modules are digital, but this one is analog because it's a mixer. Okay. So it's an analog 2-channel stereo mixer. So you get 2 stereo channels, and each of those channels has a ducking input, so that like the classic sort of French house sound and hip hop and lo-fi. You know what I mean? You kind of.
I was trying to explain to them. I was like, okay, there's this French, and I was like, it's all about ducking. It's when the kick comes, the bass ducks, and they're not fighting each other. They're working rhythmically to make up like a pumping,
sound.
pulsing sound.
Yeah. And that's real. We don't even realize how much we hear that in the music that we love. But it's like, I mean, French House is huge for it. Lo-fi is huge for it. I mean, hip hop, the biggest hip hop producers we know, like that side chain and ducking, it may be called any of those things. And so that kind of goes to partially my ethos of like, I design from the perspective of a beat maker, from hip hop, from DJ culture, hip hop culture, and that sort of stuff. So when I'm designing my stuff, I'm really thinking about, I guess, first and foremost, how I might use it because of the aesthetic that I'm going for. But then for folks like both of us and whoever might follow us, it's going to be on that. That.
And for anybody that's kind of don't know what we're talking about, a person that I would say right now that use it almost in an extreme way is like a K-Tronada. When you hear a K-Tronada beat,
that's right.
That's that pulsing, pumping sound, like, and you're just like, why does it sound like it's like it's just
like it's breathing?
And that's the pumping sound. So K-Tronada definitely uses the sine chain for. I mean, if you know, right now that I would say.
Yeah.
So
that's transit, and that's kind of the name is a dedication to like me riding the CTA at Chicago Transit Authority. You know what I mean? And like growing up, that fueled me, and you know, a million rhymes written riding the bus and the L train and the subway in Chicago, and that was the mode of transportation. I don't know why, you know, it's just this module. I just wanted to kind of dedicate that to that. So it's a 2-channel stereo mixer. Each of the channels has a mute. Each of the channel has its own gain. It really is a kind of full-featured mixer, and then that ducking input, so that if I'm running a bass line or some melodic stuff in there, I could throw a signal into the ducking input and make that pumping on either of the channels or both, which gives you a lot of creativity because you can run an envelope or an LFO and other stuff through it to kind of create these trippy sort of vibes about it. And then it has, unlike some of the other things out there, it has its own headphone jack. Now this is really like mixers typically are like that, right? But in this format, things tend to be very stripped down, but I still want that feature set and functionality plus the added ducking input that just kind of gives it a little left side vibe. You know what I'm saying? Just goes.
So would you run that after the performer or before the performer?
I've done it both ways. Okay. Like right now, I'm actually running it before the performer.
Okay.
Because what I'll do is I have my drum module going into one channel, and I have my my oscillator or melodic content going through the other channel, and then I'll run that out to the performer, you know, and then that way I gotta get effects on both of them like that. So
man, that's incredible. So and then so then the next
module after transit was, let me see, we actually move on to Trinity. Yeah. So Trinity was next, and it seems like, so I launched my company with Performer on 10/10 in 2020. 10/10 the following year was Osiris with transit between that. Then the following year was Trinity, and I think that was around 10/10 or around somewhere around September, October. It's really my heavy release months, right? So did Trinity, but the key with Trinity is, you know, I wanted to be able, again, it's the same philosophy with Osiris. How can I get the widest swath of sounds and flexibility without having to have 10 modules? You know what I mean? Or even 3 or 4 or 5 for that matter. Because my goal is to kind of get to this thing, a system that's not too much bigger than this. You know what I mean? And so I want to be able to have my drums in there, my melodic stuff in there. And I did mention about Osiris's, it's an oscillator that has 2 oscillators in it. You could be used like 2 oscillators.
Okay.
So wavetables tend to have a very digital sound, and it can be desired or not desired. So what I wanted to do is I added a sub oscillator in there, and what that does is it adds some weight and some heft to the melodic piece. It gives it a little more low-end content to it. But I've also set it up where you can address that sub-oscillator separately, so you can have a melody playing on the wavetable part of the module and the bass line playing on the sub-oscillator part of the module, right? So that's when you get into stuff that there's not typically those things that are created that way and engineered that way. But back to Trinity, the idea of being able to have that flexibility like that, I did some beta testing for companies and even reviewing for companies that made drum machines. And then I remember doing this one, and I won't say the name of it, but we did this one drum machine, and I did some videos on it, and people were like, yo, that thing is analog, it don't sound analog, or it don't sound like this or that and the other. Then I started thinking, like, we don't know how these things sound. Like, we know 808, 909 and all those things, but I really feel like in my heart of hearts, we really don't know how them joints sound. Not many of us have been in the room with those things. And what I think people don't realize, people that maybe don't make music or just haven't been experienced being in the room with some of this equipment is they don't realize just how much these things get processed. You know what I'm saying? You pull it out the box and you play it, you might be like, that don't sound like, you know what I'm saying?
All the time.
Right?
All the
You
time.
think of Beastie Boys or Run DMC or whoever else throughout but they were using analog mix boards. They had, it hit tape. But thinking of the end result, the sound that I want at the end of the thing, right? So when I decided that, we're going to make this drum machine or this drum module, one is in Eurorack, you have a thing that does a thing, right? Like there's one-to-one sort of thing. Like you have a drum module, but when you think of a drum machine, you have, these 8 drums, and each of it has a filter, and maybe there's effects at the end and all of this stuff. But then it further gets processed when it's coming out. And what's it coming out of the stereo out, or is it coming out of the mono out for the individual instrument? And I took all of that into consideration and said, listen, I want a drum module that I can design drum sounds on, from anything from a wood block to a clap to a drum to static if I want to, you know what I mean?
And as that's my first. I'm gonna get more. I'm working on the hue. I'm working on it. But as far as me just getting into the Trinity, like, man, I still haven't touched all the sounds and just playing with it, like, man, hours. Like I could sit hours just going through the sounds and just doing that, and just especially I guess that's the hip hop coming out, just where you just hear drum sounds and you just feel like, ooh,
Yeah, of course, that's right.
you just be like, man, you just be high. You just be like, yeah, I'm just hot in the spot. So, and I've noticed, like, with that particular piece, it seems like that is the piece, the premier piece that is like getting the word out there for you. Am I correct?
It certainly is. I mean, Osiris was. I think I've been fortunate to have interest in the core sort of community, regardless. Like from Performer, that was received really well. As a matter of fact, that's what kind of solidified my distribution deal. It's weird. You grew up in the, rapping and running around and being a part of the hip hop culture, and your ideas to get a record deal, get distribution, and all these things. And here I am designing modules, and it's still sort of the same sort of thing, right? Like, so when I did Performer, the reception to Performer, how people received it, and how the orders were coming in, is that's how I solidified distribution with the company that distributes my line, right? So that was a good situation, and then that kind of opened up the door, because I was like, I got more, right? But then Osiris was received really well, and then Trinity comes, and it's like, I think it just, everyone builds on the next one. And Trinity is one of those things, because I think in Eurorack there's some really dope drum modules, but none of them are like Trinity. And there's some other ones that, like, I could name a few that, like, I'm still a fan of other modules, even though I'm designing my own. So there's a few really dope modules out there, and there's some that are like individual drum modules that are really dope. But I think Trinity is kind of has this sort of cross section of things that you probably can't get in all these other places, right? And it'll make good complements to some of the other things and stuff. So Trinity has 3 voices, and it has 4 types of drum synthesis on it. So you can take think of it like as channels. So you have channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3. You can say channel 1, I want to choose from these 4 drum synthesis types. So I'm going to make that the block synthesis. On channel 2, I'm going to make that the arcade synthesis. On channel 3, I'll make that the FM synthesis, right? And so from there, now you got this wide swath of sounds that you can kind of develop and build from, and it's all within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 knobs, and then 4 more additional knobs. So was that like 11 knobs? And you're controlling parameters that's going to tweak each of those drums to the heavens, to your heart's content, and you can create all kinds of stuff. And the idea here is, if I'm a sampling kind of dude, because like for instance, the idea with Trinity is I can connect it via USB, I can connect it via CV, and I can program drums on it. But then maybe sometimes you just want to sit, like you were saying, like you marvel over how these drum sounds are coming up. I'll sit and just have sample sessions where I'll just tweak drums. You know what I mean? See, there was probably 15 different drums. Just
the spectrum of sound just
right?
changed immediately.
Yeah, and so what I did, like for instance, with this kit that I'm working with, I just sampled all of the drums that I was making one day, and kind of came up with these things. Every one of these drums comes from Trinity.
Right now, you're going CV, or you're going USB to control the sound.
Actually, I have a MIDI to CV converter,
right.
So I'm going MIDI out of the MPC into MIDI in a module in here,
right.
And then that's breaking it out to CV. I could very well just go CV direct, but it just depends on how I'm trying to do things for the moment. So yeah, I mean that's what's cool about the idea of Trinity, the fact that you could do CV or you could do USB MIDI. And also the idea that you get all this wide swath of sounds, and I wanted to be able to say like, yo, I want my drum machine or my drum module to create sounds that live somewhere between sample-based drums and synth-based drums. You know what I mean? Like, not bass drums, but the foundation of these drums, like being either samples or synth or drum machine electronic, right? And so like I've had people like, you can't really tell that that's coming from, you don't know what that's coming from.
Sounds like it's coming from PC.
You know what I mean?
So I have a question. So you're from Chicago.
Yeah.
Do you feel that being from Chicago, where there's the house vibe, there's I was telling them about from Detroit, like basically the Detroit people. From what I heard was like Detroit is very industrial, so that's how the techno life came into it. Do you feel that being from Chicago gave you an advantage for electronic music in a way? Because like a lot of places are like, let's say like a Mississippi or somewhere down south is more
live music
and blues, you know what I'm saying? Like, but being from Chicago and you being that you're around like a house music or that vibe, do you feel like that gave you an advantage to being able to construct these machines as well?
Well, I don't know. I've been told that's likely, and I say I've been told because I never really think about it. I didn't put 2 and 2 together or whatever it might be. But I do know that there's a duality in my life coming from Chicago and growing up in being young in the 80s and kind of living through the golden era of hip hop and house music while growing up in Chicago. You know what I mean? And there's a duality there. Here's the duality as I saw it and as we lived it. I'm up all night getting music from the college stations. You know what I'm saying? Recording it on tapes. Sometimes you fall asleep, don't know what the hell you're going to get. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I can remember going over somebody's house and they had what I think in my mind today was, because obviously I didn't know gear then. I was a young dude, 9, 10 years old or whatever, 11. I went to somebody's house and they had like, I don't know, a rolling drum machine and a rolling keyboard. I think what it was an 808. I think it was an 808, and there was like a JX3P or JX8P. drum machine. I mean, synthesizer. So this idea, but here's the thing. While I'm all about hip hop and my guys are all about hip hop, and we are learning, it's this thing that's kind of, you know what I mean? Boogie Down Productions is the greatest shit I ever heard. Bar none. You know what I mean? Like at the time, you know what I'm saying?
Hey, I tell people right now, like, man, like, Beef was it. After I heard Beef, I that was it. Yeah. I stopped eating meat after I heard that song.
I had not eaten beef since probably 89, 90. And people trip on that because there's a kid who decides they ain't gonna have a burger no more. You know what I mean?
And I say that to say that when people like hip hop music can be that influential, where it could just really just make your perception of life just change. Yeah. And I just know when I heard Karis want to talk about beef, and he's like, "You're eating the stress," and I was like, "Okay, I'm done. I don't want it. I don't need that." I was like, "I got enough of that, so I don't need it." So I said it to say that, you know, I feel like, and me getting into the modular thing, and I've let them hear some of the stuff that I'm doing. So I've been always tinkering into the electronic and the house thing, but now that I've gotten into the Eurorack space, I'm like, yeah, it's just only natural. I feel like it's just like it's like a part of what I'm doing now, and how can I incorporate it to just Modbap? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? How can I Modbap the sound? So I'm not gonna. You got more equipment. I want you to talk and make sure we get that going.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say, like, when, you know, this duality of hip hop and house music and that thing, not just seeing certain equipment and knowing that some people were into certain things. It's like footwork and being on the street and hearing, you know, jack music and house and all that kind of stuff. But then we live in hip hop, but when it's time to go party, ain't no hip hop parties. At that time,
I was a Mr. Lee fan out here, and people were like, "What is Mr. Lee?" I was like, "Mr. Lee, man," and then the Chief and Apache and that kind of stuff, like that. I was like, that was stuff that I was listening to.
We lived for Lil Louis parties, man. I mean, like, there was things like where we would go to all ages parties, obviously, because we were underage, even in high school and all this kind of stuff. And we would be at house parties that Lil Louis was going to DJ, and he was making some of the biggest house records at that time. But then when we were like in our car or going to wherever we going, if it was one of our houses, it's only all hip hop. So I think in the time I was thinking kind of like, I don't really care for that other music, like house music. It's just that's what's available for us to go party to. But the reality is, it's who I am. That duality makes up who I became as a person. So while I never thought about it, I do think that it somehow influenced what I eventually started doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, that's dope.
Yeah. And so the next thing, so there's Trinity, but kind of getting back to the idea of how drum sounds are processed, designed Hue. And Hue is a color processor, obviously with the name Hue and color and tones of that sort of thing. The idea is I have Hue has a filter, a drive circuit, like cassette tape saturator, and a lo-fi where you can kind of do bit reductions, or you could do sample rate reductions. And so with that, and it also has a compressor too. So the idea of that is I kind of, initially when I designed, had this design and idea for the drum module, I had those effects built in. But then I started thinking like, well, you're almost building a drum machine at this point. And with modular, it does have to be modular, right? So I decided to make that its own thing. And the ideas about processing. So Hue actually came directly on the heels of Trinity because they were kind of designed to work together. You know what I mean? This idea of being able to run your drums through this thing that you can boost the drive, add tape saturation, add sort of artifacts, which are maybe drops and little bits of tape warble and that kind of stuff.
Have you seen people run the Osiris through the Hue as well?
Yeah, I have. Because you can totally do melodic content through there too,
right? And
you know, it creates some pretty cool sort of textures and vibes and stuff. So yeah, that was the next thing. And so Performer, Osiris, Transit, and we got to Trinity. Then Hue was hot on the heels of that, and then just recently the latest module is Meridian, and Meridian was actually supposed to come out right after Osiris. But I moved some things around. It just kind of happens as I'm moving around and thinking, things just change and augment as you go. Because Transit wasn't one of the original designs. I had like a book of all these designs and specs and everything. Right. So I decided that because of the way I was putting Performer into a little pod like this, that I wanted a mixer with it. Mm-hmm. So I moved Meridian out. And so Meridian is the filter. But, when you get into designing these individual things, it's kind of like there's a million filters. What so what? What's going to make this one special? And right. But the idea for me is, when you get into synthesis, there's types of filters and they each have a different sound. There's modes of a filter and they each have a different purpose. Modes are like high pass where everything sounds like it's like no basses in it. And low pass where everything sounds like there's no highs in it. And you'll hear that in the clubs when people are kind of tweaking these different things and everything just kind of seems like it swallows and goes underwater. That's because a low pass filter is on it, right? And they dip it and they could do it the same way in the opposite direction. So what I did here is most filters are like a filter and it has low pass, high pass mode. But for me, I have this huge sort of mini refrigerator style Eurorack case in my studio, right? Imagine that.
Please watch YouTube and you will see what he's talking about. A lot of stuff going on. A
lot going on there. So if you freaking my channel, you'll see this thing in many of the videos. But it's like 18U, and for instance, that's 6 rows, I think. Maybe 9 rows. I can't think of. So it's probably 9 rows or something like. So it's 9 rows, whereas this is 1 row, right? So it's like a huge sort of mini refrigerator sort of Eurorack with nothing but modules in it. And the reason I mention that is because I have multiple different types of filters in there. I still wanted that flexibility where I can link a filter to another filter to another filter and kind of create a whole nother sound. That's not typical of one filter alone. And then there's some of my favorite synths had multiple filters on it too. So that's what I wanted to do with Meridian. So Meridian has 4 different filters in it. There's 2 different sides and it has 4 different modes in it and there's 2 different sides. So the idea is you could choose a filter type and a filter mode on one side, do the same thing on the opposite side, and parallel process them or process them in series. And so, it's just something that kind of creates a whole nother level of tweaking and tweakability and sound. But, if you're doing a set, I got, saved features, which not a lot of modules do. So
yes. Right. Some, but it's not easy. Yeah, it's right. Not easy when you try.
So I try to put a save function and restore function on my modules. So the idea here is you have 4 different slots on the filter module, so you could set up 4 different types of filters, choosing from those different configurations. And as you perform in your set, you can load the next filter potentially, for those different things. So the idea is always, you probably see a theme now that with my modules, I'm thinking of how can I get the most out of this space but still keep the interface as understandable as possible. And that, like I said before, the idea of distilling complexities down to something that's very usable but very flexible.
Yeah. And just to play along what you're saying, because me getting into the whole modular thing, I would tell people like, I may make a sound today that I may not be able to get back. And people was like, well, why would you do something like that? Well, why would you do something that you're not going to be able to get? I was like, that's the beauty of it. Because it's like once it's there and I have it and then you just in it, and I'm like, maybe, I may, like we were talking about with the crackhead chasing the high. Like, you know what I'm saying?
You're constantly on that journey.
I had that sound yesterday and I try to get it, but then you'll wind up making something else and you'll forget about that sound, and then you'll be like, well, I want to try to get it again, and then you'll just create, and then it just keeps going on. You keep layering and making a different sound, chasing that other sound. Well, but we won't say it's like crack because you know what I'm saying. Like you're not going down. You're still learning and you're still getting or whatever. So. Are you going to come out with all your pieces? Like how like a Make Noise and like ALM, like how they just have like the complete set. Are you going to have like this is going to be the Modbap set?
Yeah.
Bow like
totally. That is. I'll tell you, it's funny. My daughter graduated high school, and she went to college, and she always, I guess that's what daughters do. Joke on their dads, right? Like it's fun. We have fun back and forth. But she was like, "Dad, you sat there and you looked at the computer screen at these Modbap these Modbap modules that you were designing and these mock-ups that you were creating. Like when I left and went to college and you were looking at your computer screen every single day and mocking up these things. And then I came back and you finally had something out, but then you were still looking at the computer screen. What I was looking at is the complete system. So I've always had a complete system design, and each one of those things kind of broke out into, specs and all the things that go into making it. And then, me and my devs will get together and we'll kind of build it up from there. So yeah, the end game is complete system. And when you think about it, I mean, I've kind of been moving at breakneck speed just because, listen, that's just what I'm on. I don't really rhyme or reason. I'm just saying, like, if we can get it, let's get it.
Yeah, man, you've been as far as just a person and you not being a WMD or just like a real factory type thing that's kicking the stuff out. You doing it as an individual. I say, man, you definitely doing light speed, but. Man, I'm not. I could ask questions all day, but I don't know. Christy, did you have a question? Maybe you something that's on your mind because I can tell you they have something. I can tell. I can see it.
Yeah. What's the general feedback that you get from people, especially when they hear it for the first time?
I feel like people are intrigued and interested, and even I've gotten a lot of feedback that people are like, "I've been searching for that." I've been searching for something else.
That was me.
You know what I mean? Because I think, so for me, my personal journey has been chasing a individual sound and also being able to explore new tones, timbres, textures, and sounds without necessarily leaving the love of hip hop. You know what I mean? And like you can explore all kinds of different things, but it's not easy to kind of break through a barrier of like something new, something that feels fresh and something that feels like, oh, well, so here's the thing. With beat making, we have our formulas, we have our techniques, and we've learned from the greats. And that is what it is. They are tried and true forever. You know what I'm saying? But my thought was like, I spent time learning how to flip samples, chop things, and recreate and do all kinds of stuff to do beat making. Those same sensibilities I can do with Eurorack. I can make a soundscape that has all these different textures and stuff, and then I can sample that, and I can chop it, and I can loop it, and I can create all new sounds and patterns and beats from that stuff. So I think that's the kind of stuff that people see. When I get the feedback, it's like, yo, I've been chasing something else to kind of go somewhere else and kind of expand my creativity, but still be doing, the kind of beat making that I like to do. And I think that's probably the biggest feedback that I've gotten. Or even people that have been trying to incorporate these things that just kind of felt like they were, kind of getting somewhere, doing some things. Maybe it was some stuff, but it's cool to see other people exploring the same thing and coming out with good results and stuff. So I get a lot of that kind of feedback really when people hear it. And sometimes it's just like, yo, it's familiar, but it's new. I get that a lot too. That's familiar, but it's new. Like what? Like, it feels like boom bap or trap or whatever it is, or even lo-fi, but then it's all these other textures and flavors over the top. Like, so I get a lot of that kind of stuff when people are hearing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And then what's the what's the future look like for this? Like, do you see like Coachella or like some like big like larger festivals? Because one of the intrigues of it is the impermanence of, no one's gonna be like, oh, they're playing my song.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like I'm here to hear the stuff I haven't heard before and I never will hear again. It's
Yeah.
a moment in time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but it that's the core of it, really, right? Like this idea of you're kind of capturing a moment. And I like the sort of free form of it all, but then also I like the rigidity of beat making. So, the thing is, I think as it grows, there'll be more recordings, and there's people that have put out instrumental projects of Modbap. I've put out a compilation of it too. But then the idea, like, I'll take time to create a beat set. Somebody just asked me to do a video beat set of something, and so then, like, this is always on at the crib. I'm always making something and moving to the next, and I'm making something. Even if I turn back on, I go to the last project I had. There's been a time when I've had like 99 sequences in one project, but then there's key beats in there that's gonna go to a 20-minute beat set that I might play from that. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is this again, a duality there where there's going to be records that people know, and there may be records right now that people know where people use these same sort of equipment and processes to do things. But I also think the idea of it's similar to like freeform jazz. It's going to happen right then, and you may not hear it again. Which is also why I record everything.
And that was the beauty for me, because I was like just to make something that you may not, and as like you really could get into the days of jazz where they made live recordings at the venue, and like there's a record from that venue, and you can be like, this you're not gonna get this. No, like I don't even know if I can do this again. You know what I'm saying? So it's a beauty of freedom to just create something that may not even be repeated anymore because it was just captured at that moment.
Yeah.
So I know I don't want to keep you. You have some more questions?
I'm good. Yeah.
You got one? Go ahead.
So I love what you're doing. Like, this is incredible. It's
Thank
like
you. Appreciate it.
It throws me back to like Matthew Herbert, Richard D. James, but like it's like accessible, and it's like on this whole new level, and it's like it's just bringing back like all of these sounds, from like 25 years ago, and doing a new thing. Like, who are your biggest influencers for this?
So I would say that new and old, and it goes back as far as I've learned through years. Like, I would read the back of albums and see, on Isley Brother records, they used to actually put the actual synths and instruments and stuff that people would play, where they would be like, and they wouldn't even do, like, they would name drums, but they wouldn't say the brand of the drums. They would name this dude's on the bass guitar, but they wouldn't name the brand of the bass guitar. But when they say this dude's on synths, they'd be like, he's on the R2600. He's on, you know what I'm saying? He's on a Nemo. And so that stuff has always been intriguing to me. But I was an adult already when I started to realize the sounds that I loved and that I end up chasing in my own production were synthesizers. Didn't realize that, and I realized as I was sampling things, and I started realizing the things that I'm sampling, I could go get that gear and put it in my music and continue to kind of play. So a lot of the old soul and stuff, even Stevie Wonder, I always mention Stevie Wonder as an influence, not just because, it's Stevie Wonder and he seems to be everybody's influence, but the idea that, there was, I think it's called Tonto, the Expanding Head Band. These guys put together like one of the first like behemoth modular synths, right? And they told a story on some documentary that I watched that like they put out a vinyl in like early 70s, late 60s. They weren't even sure it was music because it was new. Synthesizers were new, and it was experimental sound and all that kind of stuff. Those are my influences. And then they said, like, Stevie Wonder shows up with their record under his arm, like, teach me how to do this. Then we get all of the classic Stevie Wonder records. And we ain't knowing nothing. There's not anything, but that's not even something that other than tech folks might even talk about. But those sounds that influenced my growing up, and like that are the soundtrack to so many of our lives. As I got older, I started to realize like they're digging into synths and modular stuff, and then that's the birthplace of all of this stuff. and then so it's other. Mort Garzin is another guy. It's not the typical thing that most people would be into. I'll bet you there's people that might sample heavy and collect records. There's people that collect Moog records, actual Moog records. Boom, right? So there was this rash of this time where everybody was just doing records based on the Moog synthesizer, right? And that was like a theme of a bunch of records, and you can collect those things. And so around that time, there was guys that were experimenting. Probably was early electronic music. It was early dance music and early ambient and all those kinds of things. As I got older and started learning more about those things, I'm like, yo, this is trippy. And I would sample a lot of that stuff. And then that's when I started realizing, like, well, I can actually, there's Eurorack now, which is like, you know, the descendant of huge modular synths and stuff. So, I mean, you got all of those early things. And then when it comes, you know, I'm a fan of all the greats like Dilla and Pete Rock and, you know, all those things. And so these are the influences. It's this kind of, it feels like a grab bag of influences, but that's my bag. That's what I've always been interested in. And I've just always tried to kind of connect the dots. And with documentaries that come out, and I started realizing, I'm like, yeah, no wonder I love Mort Garzin. No wonder I've always loved Stevie Wonder. No wonder I've always loved all these different Moog records. And then no wonder I'm entranced by, you know, this and that beat maker that kind of create these grooves and stuff. And I just try to incorporate it all. And reality is, it's kind of retrospective, where what I'm doing, then I look back and I'm like, it's the lineage. You know what I mean? What they're doing kind of, it's like one thing stacks on another, stacks on another, stacks on another. And to me, it just all makes sense. It like crystallizes with the people that I've followed and things that I've been influenced by. One way or another, there's these little dots that connect across the board.
Fantastic. Wow.
No doubt.
So I'm gonna I don't want to keep you too long because, like I said, I can ask a million questions all day. But I say I'll give you DAW of choice. What is your DAW of choice?
I'm a Logic guy.
You're a Logic guy,
but I have not used the DAW in a while.
You haven't used the DAW in a while.
I haven't.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
You just been hardware.
Yeah, just been hardware. But it wasn't like, I always say that I never made a conscious choice to say go DAW-less or anything.
Right.
But here's the thing, as growing up as an MC, is when I used the DAW the most, recording myself and that sort of thing. As I got more into beat making, I just didn't find the need as much to use a DAW. You know what I mean? I might two-track into a DAW, right, because like that idea of like this thing that you're creating that you may not get again, I like to kind of grab that moment. Capture it, and let it kind of be what it is. You know what I mean? But if it comes down to a DAW, it is Logic. I've used Logic since it was eMagic before Apple bought them.
I remember that.
So as a you know, PC user, and then all of a sudden the DAW that I'm using to make my music got bought by Apple. That's the reason I bought a MacBook, and I've been on Apple ever since because of Logic. So I guess in the real down, when it gets down to it, I'm definitely a Logic guy. That changed my whole thing over to Mac in the first place. So, but yeah, that's the DAW of choice when I use a DAW.
And I'll make this my last VCA of choice. Like, what is it? Because everybody says there's never enough VCAs in your rack. Yeah. So, what is your VCA of choice right now?
VCA of choice. I mean, man, I don't know. I guess it depends on what it is. Like, I have a quad VCA in another case, and I think that's by
Black. I think when you said, I think I know you talking about Erica.
Well, I do have an Erica Sense VCA. Okay. I have another one, and I can't think of the name of it at any rate. But in a way, I mean, a mixer is a VCA, right? And so also in Osiris, I have a VCA built in. Oh wow! So I would say my Modbap Modular. Okay, I didn't know that. That's the thing. Osiris has a VCA in it and a sort of decay envelope. Okay. So I almost designed a couple of these things in a way to just build it in, put that
So
in.
you wouldn't have to have a VCA at the end.
Not
Wow.
as much.
Okay.
So, yeah. Well, I do have a dual VCA here by Mosaic.
Okay.
So that's dope. So sometimes I will need them, but I think, yeah, maybe I'm use this one more than anything. This Mosaic VCA.
Okay.
And because my melodic content is coming from Osiris, I hardly ever need a VCA because that's what it is. And then too, I guess essentially what I would use a VCA for Trinity is kind of built in too. So, you know, I kind of built them in, but it is a thing, like you can't have enough VCAs, and there's a lot of dope ones out there that give you a ton of inputs and outputs and stuff. So yeah.
So any new projects coming out, like music projects that you got going on?
Yeah, so I have been meaning to put out a project. It's called Rum Punch. So eventually Rum Punch will come. Just a few months ago, I released King Rising, right? And that's a Modbap project. Before that, there was a compilation of all these, like, I think it's 19 Modbap producers or producers that had kind of experiment in the Modbap space.
That's what I'm gonna ask you if you could just give a quick, like, some quick names of, like, because I'm a YouTube person, and just like so other people can just kind of just see other people, because you know, I know I'll lead the architect. I'm Travarsky. I find Shiro. You know, so I see a lot of people. So if you know, just give them a shout and just let the people know who to look out for. The Modbap core. You know what I'm saying?
I got my guy Upright. He's one guy that actually was a current influence, because I saw the way he was rocking, and I'm like, he's just ill. So Upright is one. Voltage Controller is another that most people probably know about. Ali the Architect is ill. Like he combines Eurorack modular synthesis in his trap beat making like none other. And it's outlandish how dope it is. You know what I'm saying? We got Ken Flux Pierce is another, and these are all kind of squad, family and stuff like that. But almost anybody, and then New 8, he's actually a dude that's from overseas, and he's just like, if you just heard his music, you would think he was from New York. So he's like really boom bap, but he incorporates all this electronic music into it too, and it's just like dark gorgeousness. You know what I'm saying? Wow. And but there's a couple guys, but I would say the easiest one, because I'm thinking of all of the guys that's on the compilation. So the compilation that I put out is a Beat People compilation, BEATPPL, and it's called Digging in the Wires, kind of like an ode to digging in the crates, right? Because we're digging in the wires, and it's Modbap, this boom bap fusion with modular synthesis. So Digging in the Wires is a double LP. There's 19 beat makers on there, 20 beats on there, and it's just some of the dopest music that you might want to hear. It kind of crosses these lines of, it's all Modbap, but you can hear there's ambient influences on it, but it's all beat heavy, and, you know, lo-fi influences on it, you know what I mean? But it's more electronic, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So a lot of dope stuff like that. I would say if you want to support those artists, look for that record, Digging in the Wires. It's out on all the streaming services. I go by B-Boy Tech, so if you search B-Boy Tech, Digging in the Wires, you'll find that record, and it's like this whole community of dope beat makers on there.
And I want to tell people, please go watch YouTube, because you'll see some, man, I before I met this brother, all I can say is I watched video YouTube 50 times back to back, and be pointing at it and be like, look at this, and he said, look at this, do you see what's going on here? Because I know there was one session where it was like, I think it was like 4 or 5 of you guys at a table, and you guys are just going, and sometimes I have a hard time trying to find it because it's old, but I'm like, man, you gotta see this. So man, I just want to just give you your props. I want people to know exactly what you're doing. I feel that you are definitely a next wave. I feel that you're a threat to the basic companies out there, and I hope you keep going and you keep making stuff, and I hope you get the support that you deserve. And I appreciate you taking time, and I'm pretty sure Christian and Pippin, when they come back down, they're gonna be like, "Yeah, Brown, we need Corry to do this documentary." So I think I know that's coming, and so I just want to warn you that's coming.
That's what's up. I'm with it.
But I really appreciate the dedication. I know how hard it is. I know what it. I don't know exactly what it takes, but I can understand a little about what it takes to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And man, just please keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate
Nobody take you down or turn you around. And if you ever just need like the word to be out there, please let us know, because I want to push your equipment as much, and I think people should know about what's going on.
Well, I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm always, whatever I'm doing, I'm passionate about it. And I appreciate y'all for having me here, and I appreciate you for not only inviting me today, but the fact that, early on you reached out. It was a couple years ago now when you reached out and was like, yo, I want to support what you're doing. I want to put people up on what you're doing. And I appreciate that, bro. That's really appreciate.
And it's just not the equipment. There's cables. There's boxes.
Yeah.
That's a Modbap box. I'm looking at the case.
Yeah.
So just it's a whole thing that he's doing, and it's not easy, and it takes time, and it takes dedication, and I want people to know that that's what it is. So I appreciate you coming down. If you could just go out, take us out with some sounds or something like that, that would be fantastic, and we really appreciate you.
Let's see what I got.